My name is Emma Carter. I'm 33 years old, and for most of my adult life, my family treated my marriage like a consolation prize. My sister Olivia married a surgeon. I married a high school history teacher. That single fact seemed to define everything in my parents' eyes. To them, Olivia had won. I had settled. The strange thing is, I never felt like I had settled. My husband Jake was kind, reliable, funny in a quiet way, the kind of man who remembered birthdays without reminders and brought coffee to exhausted co-workers just because he noticed they were having a rough day. But none of that impressed my parents. Every holiday, every birthday dinner, every family gathering somehow became another opportunity to compare Jake to Olivia's husband, Ethan. Ethan drove a Mercedes, Jake drove a 10-year-old pickup truck. Ethan wore tailored suits, Jake wore flannel shirts. Ethan earned more money in a month than Jake made in a year. My parents never said outright that I had chosen the wrong man. They didn't need to. The message came through loud and clear, and for years, I kept the peace. I smiled, changed the subject, pretended their comments didn't bother me, pretended Jake didn't hear them, pretended everything was fine. Until last Thanksgiving, because that's when Ethan made a mistake, a very big mistake, and by Christmas, the entire illusion had come crashing down. But before I tell you what happened, let me take you back to the beginning, 5 years earlier. The first Thanksgiving Jake attended with my family. I remember standing on my parents' front porch, holding his hand. He looked nervous, which was unusual. Jake could walk into a classroom full of teenagers without breaking a sweat, but meeting my family, that terrified him. "You'll be fine," I told him. He smiled. "That's easy for you to say." He was carrying a gift he'd spent 3 weeks making, a handmade wooden serving tray, walnut, hand-carved, beautiful, the kind of thing people would pay hundreds of dollars for in boutique stores. My mother opened the door. Her smile lasted exactly 3 seconds. Then her eyes landed on the tray. Oh. She tilted her head. "How? Creative. Creative. Not beautiful. Not thoughtful. Not impressive. Creative." Jake's smile faltered, only for a second. Then he recovered. "It's nice to finally meet you, Mrs. Carter." My father appeared behind her. He shook Jake's hand. "So you're the teacher?" Jake nodded. "History." Dad gave a small hum, the same sound people make when someone tells them they collect stamps. Before the conversation could continue, another car pulled into the driveway, a brand new black Mercedes. My mother's face lit up instantly. "There they are." She rushed past us. Olivia stepped out first. Perfect hair, perfect coat, perfect smile, and then Ethan emerged from the driver's seat, 6'2", expensive watch, perfect teeth, the golden son-in-law. Mom practically hugged him before he reached the porch. "Ethan, you look wonderful." Dad clapped him on the shoulder. "How's the new surgical center coming?" Ethan grinned. "Already profitable." Dad laughed proudly. "That's my guy. My guy." I noticed Jake quietly set his handmade tray on the entry table. Nobody mentioned it again. Not once. Years passed. The pattern never changed. Every Christmas, every Easter, every birthday, the comparisons continued. Sometimes subtle, sometimes not. Olivia and Ethan are looking at vacation homes. Olivia and Ethan bought a boat. Olivia and Ethan are remodeling their kitchen. Then came the questions. When are you two buying a bigger house? When are you upgrading your car? Have you thought about a career change, Jake? The worst part wasn't the comments. It was the way Jake handled them. He never argued, never got angry, never defended himself. He simply smiled and endured it, which somehow made me feel worse, because I knew it hurt him. One evening, about 6 months before everything fell apart, we were sitting on our back porch watching a thunderstorm roll across the neighborhood. Jake was unusually quiet, Finally, he asked a question. Can I ask you something? Of course. He stared into the rain. Do you ever tell them to stop? The words hit me harder than any argument could have. What do you mean? He looked at me. Not angry, not accusing, just tired. When they compare us, I didn't answer immediately because I knew the truth. Sometimes I did. Most of the time I didn't. I told myself I was keeping the peace, avoiding drama, protecting family relationships. Jake nodded slowly. I figured. That was all he said, but something changed. After that conversation, I started noticing things. The way he hesitated whenever my parents invited us over, the way he became quieter during family dinners, the way he seemed relieved whenever we left. I realized my silence wasn't protecting anyone. It was enabling everything. Still, I didn't do anything. Not yet. Then Thanksgiving arrived. The Thanksgiving that changed everything. My parents hosted as usual. The house was packed, relatives everywhere. Football on television, the smell of turkey filling every room. Jake and I arrived around 3 o'clock. Ethan and Olivia were already there, naturally. The conversation revolved around Ethan. Within 5 minutes. A recent promotion, a new investment property, a luxury vacation. My father hung on every word. My mother practically glowed with pride. Meanwhile, Jake sat quietly helping my uncle fix a broken cabinet hinge. Nobody noticed, except me, and oddly enough Olivia. I caught her watching Jake several times, not in a romantic way, more like curiosity, or maybe envy. At the time, I couldn't understand why. Looking back, I should have. Dinner started around 6. Everything seemed normal. Until Ethan began drinking. Then kept drinking. And kept drinking. The more he drank, the more arrogant he became. By 8 o'clock, he was holding court in the living room, talking loudly, interrupting everyone, telling stories nobody asked for. My parents laughed at every joke. Then Ethan looked at Jake. You still teaching? Jake nodded. Yep. Ethan smirked. Man, I couldn't do it. Jake smiled politely. Do what? Work that hard for that little money. The room went silent. I felt heat rise in my chest. Jake simply shrugged. I like what I do. Ethan laughed. Sure. Then he took another sip of whiskey. You'd have to. A few people shifted uncomfortably. Nobody said anything. Not my parents. Not my relatives. Nobody. For some reason, I looked at Olivia. She was staring at her lap, not eating, not smiling, not speaking. And that's when I noticed something strange. She looked exhausted, not physically tired, emotionally exhausted, like someone carrying a weight nobody else could see. I couldn't shake the feeling. Something wasn't right. About her, about Ethan, about their supposedly perfect life. At tea around 9:30. I went into the kitchen to grab another drink. That's when I heard voices coming from the hallway. Ethan and one of my cousins. They didn't know I was nearby. I wasn't eavesdropping. At least not intentionally. But then I heard Ethan say something that made me stop cold. I just need to keep everything together until January. My cousin laughed. What happens in January? Ethan lowered his voice, but not enough. The divorce. My stomach dropped. Divorce. Olivia had no idea. I knew it immediately. There was something about the way he said it, cold, calculated, planned. Not a struggling marriage. Not counseling. Not working through problems. An exit strategy. I stood, frozen. Then Ethan continued. And if she finds out early, everything gets complicated. The blood drained from my face. I backed away before they saw me, my heart hammering. Maybe I'd misunderstood. Maybe there was another explanation. But deep down, I knew there wasn't. And for the first time in years, the image of Ethan began to crack. I had no idea then that this was only the beginning, because less than a month later, I would learn the truth about Olivia's marriage, and my parents would finally discover that the man they'd spent years idolizing wasn't who they thought he was at all. For the rest of Thanksgiving dinner, I couldn't stop thinking about what I'd overheard. The divorce. The words echoed in my head every time I looked at Olivia. She sat beside Ethan on the couch, smiling when people looked her way, laughing at the appropriate moments, playing her role perfectly. But now that I was paying attention, I saw things I'd missed before. The tension in her shoulders, the way she glanced at Ethan before answering simple questions, the way she immediately stopped talking whenever he interrupted her. Tiny things, easy to ignore, impossible to unsee. When Jake and I finally drove home that night, I stared out the passenger window the entire ride. "You okay?" Jake asked. No, he waited. Jake was good at waiting. Eventually I told him what I'd heard. His grip tightened slightly on the steering wheel. "You think he's serious?" "Yes." "You think Olivia knows?" I didn't answer, because I already knew. No. She didn't. The next few weeks felt strange. December arrived. Christmas. Decorations appeared everywhere. My mother started planning her annual Christmas Eve dinner, and I found myself watching Olivia more closely. At first, I told myself I was imagining things, then the evidence started piling up. One afternoon she called me. That alone was unusual. We talked maybe once a month. Now she wanted to meet for coffee. Just the two of us. I arrived early. She showed up 10 minutes late. The moment she sat down, I knew something was wrong. Her eyes were red, like she'd been crying. "Everything okay?" I asked. She forced a smile. "Of course." The answer came too quickly, too rehearsed. We talked about work, the weather, Christmas plans, anything except what was actually bothering her. Then, as she reached for her coffee, her sleeve slid back slightly. A bruise. Small. Yellowing. Almost healed. But definitely a bruise. I looked at her wrist, then at her face. She immediately pulled her sleeve down. Too fast. Way too fast. A knot formed in my stomach. "Olivia." "What? Are you okay?" Her eyes widened, then she looked away. "I'm fine." The same answer people give when they're anything but fine. I wanted to push harder. I should have. But years of family conditioning kicked in. Don't make things awkward. Don't start drama. Don't ask uncomfortable questions. So I let it go, a decision I would regret later. 3 days before Christmas Eve, my mother called. I could tell she was excited before she even spoke. "You won't believe it." "What happened?" "Ethan bought Olivia a new Lexus." I closed my eyes. Of course he did. My mother sighed dreamily. That's what a real provider looks like. There it was. The comparison. Again, like clockwork. And what exactly does that mean? Silence. Mom wasn't expecting resistance. "What? You know what I mean?" "No, Mom." I kept my voice calm. "I don't." Another pause. Longer this time. "Emma, don't start." Start? That word irritated me immediately. For years she'd been the one making comments. Now suddenly I was the problem for noticing them. "I just think Olivia is lucky," Mom finally said. Lucky. The word sat badly with me because the image of Olivia's tired eyes flashed through my mind. Lucky wasn't the word I would have used, not anymore. Christmas Eve arrived cold and clear. Jake and I drove to my parents' house around 5. The neighborhood looked like something from a holiday movie. Lights everywhere, wreaths, snow. Families gathering. Normal, comforting. Except I couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to happen. The moment we walked inside, I noticed Olivia. She was standing near the Christmas tree, beautiful as always, but distant, detached, like she was physically present while mentally somewhere else. Ethan stood across the room charming everyone. telling stories, making people laugh, playing the role he'd perfected for years, and once again, my parents adored him. Dinner started. The comparisons started shortly after. Dad asked Ethan about a new medical facility. Mom asked about his investment portfolio. And Aunt asked about his upcoming ski trip. Then Dad turned toward Jake. So, how's school? The difference in enthusiasm couldn't have been more obvious. Jake smiled. It's good. Still teaching juniors? Yep. Dad nodded. Conversation over. Back to Ethan. I watched Jake stare at his plate. Something inside me snapped. Not dramatically. Not loudly. Just quietly. Like the final thread giving way. I was done. Halfway through dinner, Ethan began drinking heavily again. Whiskey this time. The more he drank, the less careful he became, and around 9 o'clock, everything finally exploded. It started with a phone notification. A simple buzz. Ethan glanced down. His face changed, only for a second. But I saw it. Panic. Then another notification arrived. And another. And another. Rapid fire. His smile vanished. Olivia noticed too. Everything okay? Ethan immediately locked the screen. Work. The answer came too quickly. Olivia stared at him. Something hardened in her expression. Not surprise. Recognition. Like this wasn't the first time. Then the phone buzzed again, this time loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. My father laughed. Busy man. Nobody else laughed. Ethan stood up. I need to take this. He walked toward the hallway. Olivia watched him go. Then something unexpected happened. She stood up too, and followed him. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. The house felt strangely tense. Even my mother seemed uncomfortable. Then suddenly a scream. Not angry. Not startled. Heartbroken. Everyone froze. The scream came from upstairs. Olivia. Without thinking, I ran. Jake cried behind me. The rest of the family followed. The scene we found changed everything. Olivia stood in the guest bedroom, tears streaming down her face. Ethan stood across from her, white as a ghost, and in Olivia's shaking hand his phone. I can't believe you. Her voice cracked. I can't believe you. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. The room felt frozen. Then Olivia looked at our parents and said the words that shattered Ethan's perfect image forever. He's been having an affair for 2 years. Silence. Absolute silence. My mother's face drained of color. Dad stared blankly. Ethan opened his mouth. Closed it. Opened it again. And no words came out. Olivia laughed. A terrible broken laugh. Not only that. She held up the phone. The woman is pregnant. A collective gasp swept through the room. My mother grabbed the dresser for support. Dad looked like someone had punched him, and Ethan, the man who always had answers, looked terrified. For the first time in his life, nobody admired him. Nobody defended him. Nobody applauded him. The mask was gone, and underneath it was someone none of us recognized, or maybe someone we should have recognized much sooner. Because the affair wasn't even the worst part. Not by a long shot. What Olivia revealed next would force our entire family to confront a truth we'd ignored for years. And by the end of the night, my parents would realize they had spent nearly a decade worshipping the wrong man. For a few seconds, nobody moved, nobody spoke. The room was so quiet I could hear the grandfather clock downstairs ticking. Olivia stood in the center of the guest bedroom, clutching Ethan's phone like it was evidence in a trial. Maybe it was. My mother looked from Olivia to Ethan and back again. No, her voice barely worked. No, there has to be some mistake. Ethan immediately grabbed onto that lifeline. Exactly. His voice returned fast. Too fast. This isn't what it looks like. I watched Jake's expression harden beside me, because everybody says that. Every cheater. Every liar. Every person who gets caught. It's never what it looks like. Except somehow it always is. Olivia laughed again. The sound broke my heart. You told her you loved her. Ethan froze. You told her you were leaving me. Nobody breathed. My father finally spoke. Tell me she's wrong. Ethan looked at him. The same man who had treated him like a son for years, the same man who had defended him countless times, the same man who had compared Jake to him every chance he got. And Ethan couldn't answer, because he couldn't. The silence answered for him. My father took a step backward. The disappointment on his face was unlike anything I'd ever seen. It wasn't anger. Not yet. It was devastation. Olivia unlocked the phone again. There are hundreds of messages. She looked directly at Ethan. Hundreds. My mother covered her mouth. Ethan. Then Olivia said something that changed the entire direction of the night. The affair isn't the reason I stayed. Everyone looked at her, including Ethan. His face suddenly lost all color. He knew what was coming, and he didn't want her to say it. Olivia. His voice carried warning. She ignored him. The affair isn't even the worst thing he's done. A cold feeling spread through my chest. I suddenly remembered the bruise on her wrist, the fear in her eyes, the exhaustion. The way she always looked at Ethan before speaking, like she needed permission, and suddenly all the puzzle pieces started fitting together. Too perfectly. Too horribly. My mother seemed to realize it too. Her eyes widened. Olivia. My sister slowly rolled up her sleeve. The room collectively froze. Bruises. Several. Not fresh. Not old. Different stages of healing. A timeline. Evidence. Proof. My mother's knees nearly buckled. Dad caught her before she fell. Ethan immediately pointed. That's not what you think. There it was again. The same line. The same script. The same desperation. Olivia didn't even look at him. He tracks my phone. Nobody spoke. He controls every account. Still silence. I don't have access to our savings. My father stared at Ethan. What he saw there must have terrified him, because for the first time, he looked genuinely afraid. Not of Ethan, of how wrong he'd been. For years, my sister continued. He reads my emails. Jake moved closer beside me. I felt his hand squeeze mine. Olivia's voice grew stronger with every sentence. Like someone finally remembering who they were. He decides who I spend time with. He checks receipts. He monitors everything. My mother began crying. The ugly kind. The kind that comes from guilt. The kind that comes when you realize someone was suffering right in front of you and you never noticed, or maybe you didn't want to notice. Ethan tried one last time. She's exaggerating. Nobody looked at him. Not one person. The spell had broken. The charm was gone. And suddenly he was just a man. A deeply insecure man. A controlling man. A dishonest man. A man who needed everyone to think he was perfect because the truth was unbearable. Then Olivia delivered the final blow. I met with a divorce attorney 3 months ago. Ethan's head snapped toward her. You what? For the first time all night, he sounded scared. Actually scared. Not embarrassed. Not frustrated. Terrified. Olivia smiled. It wasn't a happy smile. It was freedom. You heard me. The room fell silent again. Then my father did something none of us expected. He stepped directly in front of Ethan, the surgeon, the golden son-in-law, the man he'd admired for years. And he said, "Get out." Ethan blinked. What? You heard me. Dad's voice shook. Not from fear. From rage. Get out of my house. My mother nodded through tears. Leave. Ethan looked around the room searching for support. For allies. For someone, anyone. But nobody moved. Nobody defended him. Nobody rescued him. Not this time. His eyes landed on me. Then Jake. Then Olivia. And finally my father. He realized it was over. The image. The reputation. The illusion. Gone. Without another word, Ethan grabbed his coat and walked downstairs. A minute later the front doors slammed. The sound echoed through the entire house. Then silence. Real silence. Not the tense silence we'd lived with for years. A different kind. The kind that comes after a storm. Olivia sat down on the edge of the bed and completely fell apart. Years of fear. Years of pressure. Years of pretending. All of it came pouring out. My mother wrapped her arms around her, both of them crying. My father stood motionless, looking 20 years older than he had that morning. Then his eyes found Jake, and for the first time in nearly 8 years, he really looked at him. Not through comparisons, not through expectations, not through money. Just looked. Jake shifted awkwardly. Dad cleared his throat. "I owe you an apology." The room went still. Jake blinked. My father rarely apologized to anyone. "I was wrong." His voice cracked. "I spent years measuring people by things that don't matter." Jake didn't say anything. Dad continued. "I judged you because of your paycheck." Silence. "I judged you because of your profession." Another pause. "And I never bothered learning who you actually were." My eyes immediately filled with tears, because this wasn't just an apology to Jake. It was an apology to me too. For years of comparisons. Years of criticism. Years of making us feel less than. Jake finally smiled. A small smile. "It's okay." Dad shook his head. No, his voice broke completely. "It's not." For a moment nobody spoke. Then something unexpected happened. Olivia looked toward Jake. "You know something funny?" Jake raised an eyebrow. "What?" She laughed softly through tears. "For years Mom and Dad thought I had the perfect marriage. Everyone listened. And I spent years wishing mine looked more like yours." The room went completely still. I looked at her. She smiled sadly. "You and Emma actually like each other." Nobody laughed. Because she was right. The simplest truth in the room was also the most important. Jake and I weren't perfect. We argued. We struggled. We worried about money. We had hard days. But we respected each other, trusted each other, protected each other. And suddenly that seemed worth more than every luxury car Ethan had ever bought, much more. That night Olivia came home with us. Not because she had nowhere else to go, but because she finally had somewhere safe to be. And honestly, that's what family should have been doing all along. The months that followed changed everything. Olivia filed for a divorce. The affair became public. The hospital launched an internal investigation after additional complaints surfaced. Ethan's reputation collapsed faster than anyone expected. Turns out image can only carry a person so far. Eventually the truth catches up. Meanwhile, Olivia slowly rebuilt her life. Therapy. A new apartment. A new job. Small steps, but real ones. And for the first time in years, she looked lighter, happier. Alive. For my parents, the change wasn't instant. People don't undo decades of thinking overnight, but they tried, and that mattered a lot. The biggest moment came 6 months later. Dad invited Jake over to help build a deck in the backyard. Just the two of them. They spent an entire Saturday working together, talking, laughing, sharing stories. When Jake came home that evening, he looked stunned. "What happened?" I asked. He laughed. "I think your dad actually likes me." I laughed too. Only took 8 years. The following Thanksgiving felt different. Not perfect, but different. Healthier, lighter. Nobody talked about salaries. Nobody compared houses. Nobody compared careers. For once, people talked about things that actually mattered. Near the end of dinner, my father stood up and raised his glass. "I want to say something." Everyone looked up. He turned toward Jake, then toward me, then Olivia. I spent a long time confusing success with character. The room went silent. Dad swallowed hard, and I almost lost sight of the people who mattered most because of it. He lifted his glass higher. "Here's to good people." His eyes settled on Jake, the kind who show you who they are when nobody's watching. Nobody said anything for a moment, then glasses clinked around the room. And for the first time in years, it felt like home. Because here's what I learned through all of this. The happiest marriage isn't always the one that looks impressive from the outside. The most successful person isn't always the one making the most money. And sometimes the people everyone admires are hiding the darkest secrets. Character matters. Kindness matters. Safety matters. The people who make you feel valued matter. Everything else is just decoration. And if someone constantly makes you feel smaller so they can feel bigger, they're not winning, they're performing. Eventually the performance ends. The truth always takes the stage. And when it does, the people who built their lives on appearances rarely survive the spotlight.